So you've played your Telltale games on mobile. I respect the dedication to playing your games on the go, I can't say it's my thing, but with these huge bugs and glitches on your platform of choice, it's no wonder that by now you're not such a fan of the development team. For instance, for some people when they boot up The Walking Dead Season 1, episodes appear to have never been released, will not download, and save games don't carry over between update versions. In many cases the game will open or load in an entirely black screen and never progress further. The game attempts to connect to Telltale servers, gets stuck, and never allows the player to continue without the connection. Wolf Among Us has left players with a game that simply will never launch at all, and if they do get it to start, sometimes choices will be left with "this choice is blank" in place of actual dialogue decisions. Walking Dead Season 2 was known for a mixture of both of these bags of issues. Tales from Borderlands doesn't work in 5.1 surround sound, although being advertised that way, and some people continue to report the same issues as in the past titles. Game of Thrones infuriated many players on release because those that could actually play it couldn't pass many of the battle quicktime event prompts. Minecraft Story Mode wouldn't properly cloud save, Walking Dead Michonne suffered from terrible frame hitching, and so did Batman the Telltale series, which also gave players the feature of not being able to use some of their buttons when using a controller, or the inability to change screen resolution. Walking Dead: A New Frontier had issues importing saves despite being one of the hallmark concepts for that series. So maybe all that talk about how Telltale prioritizes developing their games for almost all major modern platforms wasn't worth much if they aren't actually effectively bringing their products to those ecosystems. It's hard to say, but it could also be a case of stretching themselves too thin. If they weren't so focused on putting them out on so many different markets, perhaps they could centralize development power on fixing these tons and tons of issues. Even though the idea seems nice on the surface and was initially presented for the better of all, in the end it just leaves the average optimization of all far lower than it should be. It just isn't sustainable. You also have to consider though, Telltale isn't just putting out their games on all these platforms, they're also putting out just a ton of games. In fact, since October 2013, there have only been 2 instances where it took more than 2 months for Telltale to put out an episode for any of their games. I've compiled the entire release schedule since Walking Dead Season 1 starting in 2012 by month, by year, and I'll give you a couple seconds to look it over and see just how dedicated Telltale has been to making sure their audience always has something to play. Which is especially amazing when you think about all the different stories, characters, themes, dialogue to balance, and artistic styles to develop, performers to work with, all being done by a relatively small group of writers and producers, because even if you're not super interested in every series they put out, maybe you're not playing a Telltale episode every month, there's still probably a few that you can get into. But still, does this lack of focus actually drive production away from the experimentation of new concepts and mechanics that could potentially breathe new life into the studio's endeavors, and prove a detriment to their potential greater success in the long run? It's really impossible to tell without actually seeing a new structure come into action, and from their recent releases and announcements like Batman Season 2 and Wolf Among Us Season 2, as well as Walking Dead Season 4 and the still mysterious Game of Thrones Season 2, it appears that they're more relying on past properties than pushing forward into the unknown. Speaking of which, it's a real shame that all these bugs and glitches are present in all these games. But what's the one complaint that comes up more than any other when speaking about Telltale? Perhaps it's the exact reason you yourself were turned away. It's their oldest and most concrete mechanic, the writing. All because if you really dig into the Telltale games or even just play through them a second time, you'll start to realize what everyone has been shouting about, that the decisions actually don't matter. This is the section that you'll start facing major spoilers like I mentioned at the beginning, so be wary, but at no point will I fake you out. You have complete control over which game you want to dive into the choices of. So I recommend picking the game you've already played, and if you've played more than one, perhaps your favorite. If you played none of them and are still worried about spoilers, I would go with The Walking Dead, since it's the oldest, and if you haven't played it by now, you probably won't. And if you've played none of them and don't care about getting anything spoiled, go with The Wolf Among Us, because I think it's personally the most interesting. All options are linked in the description just like the previous 2 decisions you made, with Walking Dead as option 1, Wolf Among Us as 2, Game of Thrones 3rd, and Batman is in the 4th spot. If you're still up in the air about it, maybe you want to continue hearing about Batman like in the last part. That would also be a solid choice.